Welcome to the Powering ProjeX podcast, where we equip project professionals to master their craft through raw, authentic conversations with respected experts and practitioners. Before we kick off, join the project pros who put their career first by subscribing to Powering ProjeX free on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Patreon today. Never miss the strategies that cut waste and accelerate your next win. In a world where AI promises to revolutionise project delivery, many PMOs and organisations are paralysed by governance hurdles, slow adoption and fear of disruption, leaving project professionals struggling to harness its potential without risking data privacy or workflow chaos. This episode equips you with battle-tested strategies to pilot AI effectively, build incremental wins, and advance your career by leading transformative change in project management. I'm your host, DK, and with no further ado, welcome Ryan Chafee, our resident transformation, governance, and project portfolio management specialist. Hey, Ryan. Welcome to David Mile, General Manager Extraordinaire, whose role encompasses strategic and operational leadership in the software and IT consulting industries. Hey, David.
Hi there. Good to be back again.
Welcome to Luke Belfield, an accomplished infrastructure executive who drives policy, strategic change, and effectively manages large-scale, complex infrastructure projects.
Hi there, and also welcome, Billy.
Welcome, Billy.
Hi, Billy.
And welcome to Josh Hornman, who you may remember from episode 30 of Powering ProjeX, where we discussed AI amplifying intelligence and the need for privacy, control, and human edge. Welcome to the team, Josh.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to joining everybody's conversation today.
We're really looking forward to it. So our content and questions for today. Can I just ask everybody here, because I'm kind of going into this imagining that all leadership teams actively want to use AI and are pushing for this. Is that what everybody's seeing, or is it no?
It's a no. I'd say well, it's a bit like the technology adoption in general. Like some people love it, and that's usually a small percentage. Some people are like, I'm not sure. And then there's quite a few that are like, this is going to change too much, and I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing right now. And so we don't need that.
Wow. Josh, are you
Yeah.
seeing that too?
Yeah, I'd say most of the leaders that are reaching out or I'm talking to at the moment think they need to, but it's not that they are driving for it. They're like, everyone around me is talking about this. What actually is this? And they maybe don't know enough. They're thinking they need to do it. Then the outcome resulting you can use Copilot in this way, Claude in this way. This is what an agent is. The education piece makes some go, okay, I don't need to worry about that. It's not going to impact how we do business. And then others go, ooh, I could 10x these 5 things right away, because they've got a good understanding of how, from a learning exercise, it can be implemented. But there's a ton of businesses that I'm talking to at the moment. They're like, yeah, we're good. We're fine doing what we're doing. It doesn't feel like it's going to impact us right now in a big way. And I'm not to say that it won't impact everyone, but that's kind of some of the feedback you get. And it's like, all right, no worries. Just keep paying attention.
And David, what are you seeing?
Well, I guess internally, coming from the consulting world, where the mechanic who's fixing everyone else's car but doesn't have a car that works, or the plumber who's got a blocked sink. So internally, our own internal use is sort of lacking behind. But it's up to me actually to be driving the tools that we're giving our consultants as they go out to site. I'm very much aware that if we're not arming our people with that productivity, that our competitors will be. So there's a significant focus on that, and I'm driving that within our organisation. Do I feel like I've got a battalion behind me? Not every day, right? So sometimes I feel like I'm a lone warrior out there, but I think slowly the message is getting through.
Yeah, because this is very interesting, and I'll be interested to get your thoughts. I'm a big follower of a lady on YouTube called Silicon Valley Girl, and she goes out there and she interviews all of the big CEOs. I mean, she's been YouTubing for 5 years. She's built a lot of credibility. She's built some very successful businesses herself. She uses a lot of AI within those businesses to enhance her productivity because she is essentially a small business owner. And I wonder sometimes whether that's where we're seeing the most momentum with AI because of that need to, I've got 5 staff, I want to do the work of 10, I'm going to use AI to do that. Whereas when you're an organisation that has 50,000 employees, 100,000 employees, you've got an army of workers, maybe you don't feel as much sensitivity or pressure to join the AI revolution. But then you've also got these very big CEOs across the world talking about how our lives and working lives are going to be very different in 18 months, that a lot of these, lower sort of ranking jobs, researchers, paralegals, all of that is going to be severely impacted by this because it's just not necessary to have a human staff member in that seat. So is that the reality of this?
Look, I think it is. There's a couple of things to consider there that I've been very interested in the last short period of time. One, I was reading something not that long ago how people who are well advanced with AI, some of them are getting a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of things that they are doing and now can do, which has led me to sort of coin the phrase that context switching is the next employment superpower. You're just going to have to learn, and some people are good at it, some people aren't. As you move sort of more into management, you find your context switching every 5 seconds anyway. But yeah, some people just aren't good at it, particularly some technical people I find, I guess, that I work with. They want to be in their zone, punching out their code, doing their thing with their headphones on and no one disturbing them. That's not going to work for you, I'm afraid. You're really going to need to find a new path. So yes, I think as far as, is it more small business than large business? I don't think so. We work with some very large businesses, some of the big banks and things, and, they're driving this very hard. So I think, from a BA, PM type of perspective, unfortunately, I just think those types of roles are just going to get loaded up with more projects. If you're capable of doing 3 projects before, that'll turn to 15. That's where we're heading with this. We need to build the skills to deal with that.
I could definitely, I'll echo people getting loaded up. So in the large organizations that we've been talking to, the most common response is we have so many projects on the go at the moment. And then you go talk to the people that are in charge of delivering those and they're just like, and I'm not allowed to use the tools I'd like to use because of whatever guardrails that are in place. And they know that there's this great tool over here, but they have to use Copilot. And so there is an expectation that you've been given AI and now you can do more. But if it hasn't actually been implemented, it's just been turned on, and they haven't been trained, it's just been turned on, then it gets really difficult for them to meet those expectations. So that's the large end of town. We've got 2 clients at the moment, specialist consultancy in their fields, very hard to hire, very hard to find people. And so the work we're doing with them is, can we take our existing team and get 25, 50, 100% out of them without them having to work 16 hours a day using this technology? So it's very, very focused activity around existing workflows to find opportunities to uplift.
And is that achievable, Josh?
Within the consulting worlds that they work in, yes, because most of what they do is heavy reporting outputs and analysis activities. And so, if someone's doing 3 reports a week and it takes them 16 to 20 hours to complete the entirety of a report, you pull that together in a private, hopefully, and secure space for them to be able to interact with, you can rapidly improve those outputs.
Easy. But David, we're going to head over to you now. So organisational change often moves slowly in both public and private sectors, with large entities still relying on basic tools like Copilot while fearing AI's rapid evolution. So how can project managers navigate that bureaucratic pace? And what incremental changes or proof of concept approaches do you recommend for achieving quick wins without overwhelming the system?
Yeah, so that's a really important question because we keep reading and seeing and perhaps even experiencing ourselves how so many organizations are still struggling to get meaningful ROI out of their AI investments, right? So what I've observed is that, and Josh should have touched on it a moment ago, is that out of the box tools like Copilot and Chat GPT just rarely deliver the step change returns that executives are expecting. And that's not new. Whenever we're in a major technology wave sort of hype cycle, we're being told, oh, it's easy and cheap, and it turns out to be not easy and cheap. And then we head into the valley of despair, and then we sort of get a bit of a reality check and, start to come back and realize, okay, to really make this work, we're going to need to have an investment in here, both in technology and in change management. So we need to keep that in mind. There is no admin console toggle that you just switch on and magically transforms productivity. That's not the way it works, but I think that is the expectation at the moment with some organizations. Like any sort of big technology change, an ERP or a CRM deployment, AI requires configuration, integration, and a whole bunch of change management, and arguably more change management than most other systems, because it just fundamentally changes the way that we do work. I think that's one of the problems at the moment is we're looking for the quick fix, and AI is not the quick fix. So back to the question, how do project managers sort of navigate that bureaucracy? I hate to disappoint, but in my view, it's nothing new. We need to go back to sort of more agile fundamentals and deliver value incrementally. To verbally paint the picture, it's the skateboard to scooter, the push bike to motorbike to car. It's not the chassis, wheels, body panels, interior, engine, then deliver value, right? If we take that approach, the executive sponsorship and the money will disappear halfway through the body panel, so to speak, right? We just have to go back to those fundamentals of agile, incremental value delivery. Go back on what I said a bit. We can start off with those out-of-the-box products to deliver proof of value, proof of concept, but we need to design them deliberately as a first step and make sure that we're thinking about the future as we're doing that. But the ROI, we need to understand, we need our stakeholders and organizations that we're working for and with to understand that the ROI will not come from generic AI systems. It comes when AI becomes context aware of your organization. So once we start to integrate it with our organization's data and IP workflow, that's when you start creating a sort of virtuous cycle when teams start to spend less time on the low value work and more time on improving the intelligence of the system itself. So that's where we need to get to. Start with the proof of value, start with the low expectations, show that, and then, gather the sponsorship in order to get the investment that is required to do some of the more techo things that you need to do in order to leverage AI across the organization. So a practical tip for that is to involve senior stakeholders early in the ideation. It's an old selling technique, make them think it's their idea and they'll do it, So involve your senior people in that from a very early stage and get them on board. They'll understand better and they're more likely to move faster when they've helped create the solution. So a sort of co-design type of strategy. And I guess from a design point of view, if your initiative just ends at an MVP, again, you're not going to have a lot of success, right? With an MVP you've automated today, if you design a capability roadmap, then you're really building for the future. So that's what organizations want to see, I think.
A lot to unpack there. Guys, any thoughts?
I love the roadmap. Everyone loves a roadmap, but I think few actually take the time to invest in visualizing it. I'm finding that you can actually visualize these things much faster now. And so if there is a transcript of a couple of conversations, you can turn that into the roadmap, at least from a visual perspective, so people can kind of see a bit more where they're going, why we're doing these things, what it's connected to. A critical step that I often see people just jumping in, just shooting from the hip, hoping something's going to stick without a strategy, let alone that kind of, this is where we're actually going with this.
I've been saying this absolutely all along, and I'm seeing it in some of the organizations that we deal with. If you're waiting for the perfect strategy to come out, it's just never going to happen. And a roadmap's a bit the same. Everything's changing so quickly that if you're taking 2 months to build a roadmap, it's painting the Sydney Harbour Bridge. By the time you get to the end, you have to start again because everything's changed, right? So you do need a lightweight strategy and a very agile and flexible roadmap. Yeah, this is not a let's do 6 months of workshops to come up with a roadmap type of scenario. This is more of a North Star, if you like, to use another popular organisational term at the moment. I think that's the key as well, is that, yeah, let's not plan this to death, because by the time we do that, everything would have changed.
Also probably kills the enthusiasm. 6 months of workshops, I couldn't imagine anything worse. Anyone who was excited and wanted to embrace it has probably fallen asleep and left, rather than go, yep, we've made it through those 6 months of workshops, off we go, we're implementing this cool new tool.
Yeah, 100%.
David, you mentioned the bureaucracy's always been there in these organisations and the checks and balances. I feel that it feels even more bureaucratic with the pace of change. Like, I don't think the organisations are adaptive and responsible enough in these checks and balances to actually get momentum on things that they need to get momentum on.
Yeah, there seems to be a heightened amount of fear around things like data governance and privacy. I'm a little bit miffed about why that is, to be honest with you. But I think you can allay those fears. It's taken me a little while, personally, within our organisation. And obviously within our organisation, we need to have a very clear separation of data because we deal with multiple clients and things like that. And there was nearly a sense of panic about that. And so, yes, you'd take some time to talk through that. Quite often they're fairly technical discussions that you're trying to have with senior people as well, which makes it difficult also, but that's where you need that really good babblefish, I guess, that can take technical concepts and turn them into something that executives will understand.
So what are some of the principles around data privacy and privacy that you have been able to implement that are kind of, a good starting point?
Me personally, again, I'm sorry, I'm going to get old techo now, but it's the way that you implement RAG and that type of thing by model, and for larger organizations, bringing models in-house. So rather than using API calls out, but even, the amount of time I've spent talking about how, but the model's not in-house. So how can we put our data to it? Because then the whole world's going to I've spent countless hours having conversations about how that's not the way it works, right? It's an API call, and so you do have to have those conversations. It takes a little while, but I guess I come from a data background. That's always been my background. But to me, it's not that difficult, and it's not that different to how we protect our other data, like data warehouses or CRMs or things like that, where we're keeping customer type of data. It's not very different. And I guess that's the approach I've been taking, is that, hey, this isn't really different to anything else that we're doing here, right? We have people who can run reports on customers at their own home, on their own computers. This is not much different to that, right? This is really quite similar. So it's probably drawing the similarities to what we're already doing, is to sort of explaining it as something new and different.
Josh, what do you advise your clients when you're talking about data and privacy?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously the basis of our entire product that we've been building. It's really at the moment becoming a bit of a hybrid and a balanced approach to understand where there is the need for that protection. So, have you got IP risks? I'll use a contracted risk example with a customer I talked to this week that are working with a utilities entity over here in Western Australia that has in all of their contracts now, no AI can be used on any data that we give you. And they're sitting there going, oh, I know for a fact a bunch of people in this organization working on that project will be using these tools. And so now they have to make a decision around what to do. And our product is one of the potential solutions that they want to pose. So it's becoming dictated to a lot of organizations in some way by people that they work with. But yeah, it's a hybrid approach is probably the best way that we're sort of talking about it at the moment.
Okay, that's really interesting. Luke, have you heard anything more about this? Any other thoughts?
It is a bit of a Wild West, though. I think like some are just like free ranging, like doing whatever they want, especially in the consulting space. I think more larger organizations are having more of a top-down sort of edict around you should use Copilot. That's the thing that we've bought into as a company, or you should use this proprietary, that it's at least sandpitted somewhat to their organisation, but definitely not like open source ChatGPT. But it's a challenge because the crux of it, if it makes it easier to do your job and you can get away 9 times out of 10 with using it, people will use it.
And I want to really differentiate something here because we keep talking about data, and data is such a wide term, right? But if you are a PM that's saying, can you just give me a structure for how this document should work? Or, I'm going to do XYZ document. I've just got to write myself a strategy. These are the high level points that I want to include in that. Is that giving away people's data or not? No.
No. And you could probably even do some of the mundane things that no one really takes notice of, but are important, like project management frameworks or
Correct.
Writing monthly reports. All those type of things that don't
Correct.
really add too much value, but are just time consuming.
Correct. Because I often think to myself, even when I'm, researching for stuff here and all the rest of it, and I have done this probably for each of you, I'm going to have David Mile on the show. Can you go and read his LinkedIn profile and just give me a summary of what his bio should be? And it goes and does it for me. Now, is that a breach of privacy? It is data and it is a person. So what does that actually mean? In your landscapes, in a commercial environment, is that a breach?
That's absolutely not a breach in my view, because it's publicly available data. Right? You can go to
Correct.
LinkedIn and get it. Yeah, if you said go and hack into David Miles' OneDrive and tell me some information about what's in there, well, that's obviously a data breach. But
who is David Miles really? Yeah.
Correct. Correct.
Exactly. That would be scary.
And I even think, there's scenarios where you might have, I did these 25 things on the project over the last 6 months, doesn't have any project data in it, doesn't even tell you, contractor did this, I did this person did this. Is that a breach?
Tell us, Josh.
So honestly, I think it's organizational specific. And so if that's a part of an IP related workflow within that business, then the person who's in charge of that or responsible for that is probably going to say yes. If that's part of a workflow supporting a customer that has directed to that entire business that they should not use this technology in any way, shape or form as it relates to a deliverable, that's technically a breach. But the biggest thing for me that I always get pushed back on is how's anyone going to know? How is that end customer going to know? And obviously when I spoke to you on the podcast, Daniela, we talked about me looking up in Google search when they were indexing open shared files, and I found someone's SAP download, and it was very identifying. So there's an example of how somebody going to know just by chance, right? So we are, as Luke said, in the Wild West. We don't actually know. So there's a lot of trust going on here at the moment around this.
Okay.
I explain to people that, so in that example, I would agree that that's not okay. If someone did that at my workplace, I would advise them that that's not okay. And, probably give them quite a stern warning not to do that again. But the reality is you got to think about what's going to happen to that data. That's a tiny bit of data that may be used to train a model in a long period of time, because we're not retraining models live. That's a big, expensive, exercise. So I think it's more about how someone in the future might stumble across that, right? In that scenario, the real danger is, I think, absolutely infinitesimal. It's tiny, but it's still not something you should be doing. Absolutely not. I've heard of technical people uploading architecture documents and things like that with identifying client names, IP ranges and things like that. Now, that is just bordering on stupid. I just can't believe a technical person would be that silly not to know that that's wrong. But I've seen it happen on probably a dozen occasions, and it's just a forehead slapping moment to me. So that does occur. But yeah, what we're telling people to do versus the real risk is a bit out of whack at the moment. I think we're being a bit paranoid.
All right. So if I take it from this, and I hate to harp on about this, but I think this is where it all gets a bit blurred, right? And I really want to try and solve the world's problem around this. If it is identifiable, you're absolutely wrong to do it. Yeah, 100%, no doubt about it. Further, if the organisation you're dealing with has a no AI policy, you got to write it all from scratch. You got to pick up your PMP, work out what's meant to be in those files, and you got to write it by hand. That is all there is to it, right? That's the two absolute no-nos. But if you're not dealing with that kind of organisation that's made an absolute mandate, and you're not using identifiable information, and it's just it just appears to be generic data as such, you might be okay to be able to include it in what you're doing. Everyone here thinks that's reasonable?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've heard examples of where people even stuff that up. So we're talking about integrity of data here, but even just sloppiness of work. If someone says, for example, go to a cross-jurisdictional analysis on annual leave policy or long service leave, and they serve that up, and it's got errors all through it, and then someone goes, well, did you use AI on this? And it's pretty obvious, or they're just really hopeless at their job. But both cases, they're hopeless at their job because they should have gone and checked it.
Correct. And this is a big thing. You have to ask the AI to provide you with citations. Where did you get this from? And let me go and actually evidence those line items, because that is really, really important. You can't just assume that it's right. But anyway, going over to you, Luke, drawing from the policies like the government for AI frameworks, which often reflect hype without a deep understanding, how are governments and organisations handling that pushback and resistance to AI? So particularly concerns that it will undermine workflows and roles, and what cautionary tales can you share from sectors where adoption has stalled?
Yeah, it's a good question, and love the hype. But it's also like we're at the start of this journey. Well, a lot of people are at the start of this journey. I think a lot of people on this podcast are probably not at the start. They're quite the way through that. But I guess, how do you help people who are at the start of the journey? And so I've worked in Treasury and Premier and Cabinet, and I've often seen policy frameworks and sometimes just run ahead of operational readiness. And I'd say most public or many public sector AI frameworks are very well intentioned, and they're sort of picking up the community sentiment at the moment. They talk about ethics, transparency, safeguards, and in some cases, AI means data centers to people. So, that's important, but I guess often what we see is a lack of deep understanding of how delivery actually works on the ground. It's like they're not really sure. This is a very vague thing, and they're trying to create a boundary around what this AI could look like. And they're doing those things that people are reacting to in the community. So I'd say the pushback we're seeing isn't really about the technology, I'd say. It's more about the trust. And I think a lot of people are worried about AI undermining their judgment, exposing their data, like we've talked about, disrupting established workflows, or even quietly making certain roles redundant, especially ones that involve a lot of admin or repeated tasks. And there are so many jobs that are like that. So I think when AI is introduced, and it's not a case of if, but when, if it's introduced as a cost-cutting measure rather than a capability uplift, I think the resistance will harden very quickly.
Yeah.
And so I think that the organisations that are doing this well are doing probably three things. First, they position AI as a decision support tool, not a decision replacement tool. That's a completely different paradigm. That means you're making better decisions because you've got more access to quality data. And second, they pilot with in-defined guardrails, especially around, what we've talked around data privacy and also procurement controls. And third, they involve practitioners early rather than just imposing solutions top down. Now on cautionary tales. So I've seen some sectors stall adoption because they attempted enterprise-wide rollouts before proving value. I mean, they start big, and then it's that this is everything. It's going to change your world, and they don't focus on today's problems. You need to get that first pass of people who are really interested in using the tools and get people to love it, and then broaden that approach across their work and then get to make sure it's almost mainstream rather than just trying to do everything for everyone, and that just is going to be a failure. And also that I've seen it where money just gets reallocated to other things because it's not seen as getting runs on the board. And I'd also say large capital organisations, particularly in infrastructure, are highly risk sensitive. So if early pilots create workflow chaos or governance ambiguity, the system recoils and it shuts down. And I think we've also talked about the real danger in over-governing AI. So excessive approval layers, unclear accountability, or fear-driven restrictions can create paralysis. And that will just transformations lose their momentum because the tech failed or the people using the tech didn't really know how to use it and it failed. And that can just set people back. So my advice is treat AI adoption like any major transformation. Start with defined use cases and also use cases that are important to people and they're solving real problems. Build evidence, protect data, and align it to strategic outcomes, but that quick strategy rather than that 6-week workshop type strategy. And whether that's reducing project waste, improving risk forecasting, or accelerating decision cycles, I think that's really good. AI doesn't fail because it's incapable. It fails when organisations don't prepare their culture, governance, and incentives to absorb it.
All very good points.
And saying all that, Billy is now asleep, so that's fantastic.
Gorgeous.
Just needs the sound of your voice talking about things he doesn't understand, eh?
Exactly, it'll put anyone to sleep.
It's very interesting, the concepts. There's two concepts I just want to explore here. Number one, about sort of strategic change, right? The way we talk about strategic change, because government is a very slow-moving beast, a very slow-moving beast. And I don't think it would be unusual to see a strategy paper that took 12 months to write. And by the time you've finished it, the AI that you're talking about has probably moved on significantly. Yeah, and then it creates even more chaos because it becomes one of those scenarios where it got written, put on the shelf. At some point in 3 years, some government's going to fund it and some IT company is going to pick it up and say, hang on a second, this is tech from 5 years ago. Yeah, it doesn't cost this way anymore. You know, tokens are more expensive, blah, 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 because that's invariably going to happen. Not to mention the fact that some of these admin jobs may also have changed their processes in that time. That makes it very difficult for government to be able to pick up these kinds of technologies. Would that be a fair thing to say?
Yeah, it is. And I'd also say that community expectation is that government just works this out, like that we don't need to invest a whole lot of time and money in back of house functions that should already be working. But the reality is they do need funding, but diverting funds from like publicly helping in outcomes and services, nurses, doctors, firefighters, teachers, to government bureaucrats to help them work better isn't popular.
Yeah. I mean, I would happily fund vast improvements in some government services, just as a taxpayer I'm talking about. You know, I'd love it if you could get a response from Centrelink within a couple of hours. Like, that would be awesome. And with the banks, I'd love it if you could get a loan approval within a couple of days. I mean, that would be great. So, you know, there's definitely some workflows that could benefit from AI. I'm sure that it's not an easy thing to do. I don't know. What are other people's thoughts about this?
I would love to just say, I think this is where disruption occurs and the market will drive it. And so, yes, we're talking about government here, but a lot of those services will start, I think, to become privatized or challenged by private offerings in some way, shape or form. I know a guy where I am who's building like a health lay-by service because health insurance is so challenged. And people are starting to then look at the same to serve people in like the NDIS sector and all these sorts of spaces where they're building automation solutions to get you the cash that you're meant to get so you don't have to deal with it anymore because it's a nightmare. Yeah. I've got a son with a disability, so I've navigate that system all the time. Well, my wife does, bless her. And it's difficult and very difficult, and it's becoming worse. So I think you'll see private private solutions emerging, and then in the private sector, the same, where people are going to be like, well, I'm a young upstart. I know what I'm doing. You don't seem like you're going to be able to adapt quickly enough. I'll start eating into your market share. So it's interesting because there will be a challenge from that like speed of adaptation from the big guys.
Yeah, absolutely. David, any thoughts?
Yes, I think one of the problems we're going to have around that type of thing is trust. I think I've worked on I didn't work on, had a product that was involved in triage, hospital triage for the Women's and Children's Hospital in South Australia, and took that online over COVID. Incredibly successful project. Had nothing to do with AI, by the way, but incredibly successful project that kept hundreds of ambulances out of hospital by being able to do an online triage before sending the ambulance out or bringing the child into emergency. The reason I bring that up is because I think that's somewhere where AI could be a huge assistance within that process. But we have to trust it to do that. And I don't have children, but I always hear that with your first child, they get a 5mm cut on their hand and you're straight off to hospital, and the third one loses an arm and you whack a Band-Aid on it and off you go. But so, trying to get that trust of the first-time parent to be interacting with AI about whether they should take their child to emergency or something like that, I think that's going to take a while. And we're going to expect it to be right 100% of the time, when, of course, we know that even with the great work of doctors, they're not right 100% of the time, right? So our expectations are going to be sort of so much higher. So I think that's probably more of a generational change. That's not something that's going to occur in 2 to 5 years, in my view. Yeah.
But I find that point specifically really interesting. How many times you sit down with friends at a barbecue and you can tell 100 stories of the humans that have made a mistake, that made your life uncomfortable, and yet when it comes to AI, it's like, well, it didn't get it right first time. Not using that again.
Yeah.
And how many times did it get it right and people don't talk about it? It's like infrastructure. Like, no one talks about whether an energy network got through a summer loading and everything worked, or a train network got everyone there on time. Like, people only talk about when things don't work.
Correct. And it's like people on LinkedIn complaining about people that write their posts using AI.
Yeah.
And yet, the biggest accounts I see, quite clearly using AI to write their posts. Now, I truly do believe that those posters have written a couple of lines about what they want to say, and then they've just said, okay, AI, shape this into a post for me and post it. Not you, Josh. I know it's not you because yours are very off the cuff, but you can see that. Like, I even do it with the summaries of the podcasts when I'm writing all of the posts for the summaries. I'm not going to sit there and write 3 different versions of this is what we discussed in this podcast. No. Go and write 3 posts for me. I don't have the time to do that. So I don't know. I feel like we are, as you said, Luke, we're very judgmental of it, but then at the same time, we all appreciate 5 extra minutes to have a cup of coffee, 5 extra minutes to go and do something else.
Yeah.
Ryan, thoughts?
Yeah, interesting. I was reflecting back to your comment earlier about being at a party or a barbecue and someone's mentioned that they had a negative experience with an AI. I think most of the population has probably used it once or twice, 2 or 3 years ago, and they haven't kept up. And a lot of the feedback that I'm hearing around these models is like from 2 years ago. And I think the real challenge of society is keeping up. And most people aren't at the frontier of what the technology can do. And if they realized how capable it is, I think there'd be a lot more fear out in society about what it's actually going to mean for society.
For people's jobs, yeah.
Yeah, for people's jobs.
And that's why these stories coming out of the US are really front and center for me, because there are organizations out there that have learned how to use this to be really highly productive. And, all this discussion at CEO level that certain companies are going to be left behind. And Josh, you mentioned it earlier. You speak to lots of people in the industry. Many people are like, well, I own a business. This is what I'm doing. I'm fine with my 25 admin people, because it's in our nature to build an empire. Yeah, many empire builders, especially in project management and, organizations, I see it everywhere. But the reality is there are going to be organizations that are going to far surpass you just
Yeah.
purely because they've learnt how to use this to be more productive and build better workflows. And yes, it might make mistakes, but your human team makes probably more mistakes at the end of the day than this might. And that's an assumption, by the way, clearly an
But I'd just
assumption.
say the empire building, it's always done when it's other people's money. If it was your own money, you'd be cutting down all those 25 admin resources that you don't actually need.
Correct, correct. I
That's
once actually had a leader from Project Controls in on the podcast, and one of the things that he said was, some of these big government projects, we will write 120 management plans. Said it's just not necessary. Yeah, do you know how much money goes into that? He said, is that really necessary? Now, number one, AI can pump out a management plan for you in if you've got good guidance as to this is what it needs to include, this is what needs to happen, blah, 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 you can pump that out in 30 minutes. Yeah. Or even recycling stuff that has been used in the past within that organization and just readopting, with new parameters and all the rest of it. You can easily make all those changes and have that document done. But it's very interesting that some organisations, like what Josh said, are going to say, no, I don't want you to use any AI. I want you to spend 100,000 writing that management plan. And if it takes 6 months, it takes 6 months.
I want you to use a typewriter. Yeah.
Yeah, I want you to use the typewriter. Correct. Interesting stuff.
Look, I think we need to be careful, or need to be mindful of media doing what media does as well. I read an article, I think it was late January, in Fortune or on fortune.com. And the headline was OpenAI and Anthropic reporting that AI does 100% of code. All right. So now that may or may not be true, but the way that I've seen coding, something that we do a lot of, and the way I've seen it is we're moving coders up the value chain. We're not getting rid of them. Right. So someone still has to prompt the AI to write the right code. Then AI will write verbose, sometimes not as secure as we'd like, code. So they go from being a coder typing a lot of syntax, which isn't really adding a lot of value to the world, to system designers, quality engineers, security experts, and that type of thing. So whilst we're talking about that headline, sounds like there's been a bunch of job losses, but actually people are doing more important things and there's a great deal more productivity, right? Because I can assure you, particularly Anthropic and OpenAI, they're just not going to say, oh, we can get rid of 80% of our workforce now. They're going to say, oh, we can do 80% more features each in a month now, right? So we just need to be mindful of what it means when we see headlines like that. And does that mean that we're doing more? Does that mean, that lots of people have lost their jobs? What does that actually mean? Because we all love a highly exciting headline, don't we? So.
We do. Josh, authorization and leadership are crucial for AI adoption. So we often target senior leaders as the gateway to investment, but there's also many keen individuals at the operational level who have great and novel ideas that can be explored. So how can organisations grant autonomy to power users to prevent them from leaving and becoming competitors? And what strategic ways can project leaders particularly crunch the middle and empower teams to drive transformation while highlighting the risks if organisations restrict innovation?
I want to just do a quick callback to David's comment there about OpenAI and Anthropic, because I actually think this starts with leaders. So the reality of any transformation, which is what most people are going through with AI, is we've got to go to people that have that budget to get things resourced. But at the moment, those leaders in most organizations, sort of like we talked about at the beginning, might be like, I'm not touching this. And so they're hamstringing themselves by not being open-minded about this and potentially forcing creativity out of the broader business. So I think you kind of have this opportunity to waste potential and at the same time train your future competition, which we've alluded to a little bit. And I'm not going to say that Ryan's going to leave his job and compete with whoever he's working for at the moment, but high agency people, like he kind of alluded to being earlier, which I think most of us are, and a lot of people that might be listening to us feel like they fall in that category, are the threat. I'll use a live example for us working with a financial services firm. One of the directors, they're a co-pilot only house, basically. That's just been their edict, and everyone is comfortable with it for now. but they're starting to hear what's happening around them. And I was talking to her this week, and rather than hearing all of that noise and going, oh, okay, we're not going to do anything about it, it's now a signal. And so they're starting to review the governance frameworks, the risk frameworks that they've put in place to see what they can do to adapt to what's coming next. But alongside this is this trigger that, wait a second, our people are probably using these tools in some way. If that's in the business, or probably, as most of us would be, outside of the business and testing and trying things. So from a leadership perspective, they're now implementing a mechanism by which they want everybody to feel like they've got an opportunity to share and get involved in the journey they're going on broadly with AI by having lunch and learns, drop-in sessions, and trying to create a space where people can share what they're doing and how it's impacting their own individual workflows. And I think this is that kind of frame flip to innovation, like internal innovation is the thing that drives these small wins, but can then be pulled together into a project and can be formalized with evidence and then hopefully executed on relatively quickly because you've got some proof points coming underneath. And I think there's a need for us to, as we've kind of alluded to across this whole conversation, start thinking about how we can move quicker. So there are these layers that slow things down, dilute things, 12 months to create a plan, 6 months to create a roadmap. It just doesn't cut it anymore. And so fighting against that bureaucracy is the only way I think this is actually going to start working. We're going to have to change the way we do this, the way we pitch things, because of how quick things are evolving around us. And so as a leader, you can restrict, but then you're going to have curious, capable people. And they're either going to go, all right, I can do this myself, or I can do this shadow AI or without you knowing in the hopes that it's going to help me save an extra couple of hours a day. Or you can embrace it within whatever parameters exist and try to build some ownership within your team around this. And so then they've got a little bit of autonomy around driving the next step and the next progress towards adoption within their own workflows or the whole organization. We're shadowing people at the moment in organizations where they identify these high agency people and they're going, cool, I want to help that person. I want to free them up. I want them to be able to achieve more. Let's bring a third party in, work alongside them, understand what they're doing, and then see if we can drive towards them doing 25, 50, 100% more uplift within their work. I touched on a bit earlier as well. We've got clients that are going, it's difficult for us to hire. There's competition in the market. What can we do to empower our existing team? Again, within whatever the parameters are. And so this is where thinking consultatively, trying to elevate yourself out of that. And again, this is accelerated by the use of this tech, really helps us paint these frameworks that are really, really viable and can be executed quickly. So I think the key for me is as a leader, what sort of person do you want to be? What perspective do you have on your teams and how they're using or could be using this technology? Are you empowering them or restricting them? And based on those two decisions, what is the impact of that going to be on the future of your organization? Because I think at the moment we're going to start to see this trend towards these high agency people who aren't supported, who aren't engaged, who aren't a part of this thinking and this decision framework going, oh, wow, maybe I could build something competitive, or maybe I could jump out of this and go do something that's really I find purpose in and a calling towards. And we're going to see some change as a result of that. So if we don't get that right, you're possibly going to be competing against AI first organizations in a blink of an eye.
Thoughts? I love the concept of high agency people and utilizing them as your, your alpha. Correct, right? Yeah. It's those, is it what we call them? Alpha people, the people that sort of move things forward as quickly as possible. And the great thing about those people is they are fearless in wanting to try new things. But the risk becomes not everything is going to succeed. And you have to support them through the failures as well as the successes, because we have to understand that this is an iterative thing. And I wanted to ask you all this question before I go any further. Are people using this for workflow automation? Because I think someone said earlier, we're still very much at the early days where people are just wanting to use it to check the definition of a word or, give me the structure of a document kind of thing. Are most people still in that patch?
Yeah,
they are.
100%. Yeah, most people I talk to
Definitely.
still think it's like a Google environment to ask questions and improve their search outcomes. Like that's the majority of users. And I explained Claude Cowork to someone the other day because they were like, "Oh, what's this open claw thing?" I'm like, "Well, you're not going to be able to set that up because you've got no idea what technical risk that is in. But by the way, you use Claude. Do you know what the Cowork button does?" They didn't have a clue. So I did a quick screen recording. I showed them that I can build a spreadsheet in the blink of an eye from a bunch of information. And they were like, "What?" And it was a literal like brain explosion moment because they just used it to ask questions and get answers.
Yeah, 100%. Interesting. Anyone else got any thoughts on this?
Look,
No?
I think at the risk of exposing my geekdom, I think resistance is futile. So organisations that aren't embracing this, they're really just creating a problem for themselves because it is going to occur. It will occur in shadow. People will, because they don't have any other choice and aren't being educated, they will upload the wrong data to a public version of chat or something or some other tool. So, yeah, I think, again, it's the same thing over and over again. It's like the organisations that first didn't embrace the internet. You're creating more troubles than you're solving. It makes no sense to me at all for those organisations who are banning AI, and I think history will prove them like the organisations that banned the internet early on. That'll just be considered a sort of Luddite decision in the future. So, as I say, it just makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah.
Goodbye, Kodak. That's what
Yeah.
happened.
I
Yeah.
remember with internet, introduction. The funniest thing was employees having time limits to access the internet
Wow.
and
Wow, wow,
getting
wow.
blocks of 10 minutes, and you're only allowed 4 blocks a day of 10 minutes to access the internet.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
hilarious. And you might be, yeah, and you're legitimately using it for a work function. Yeah.
yeah.
Correct.
Interesting.
Look, I really like the kind of concept of resistance being futile. You need to support those high agency people because if you don't, they'll go somewhere else where they are supported to use these tools. I find it interesting some companies are blocking like ChatGPT on kind of corporate internets and they're not providing any other tools. People are going to find workarounds to be able to use it. And the thing is, if you don't have visibility of it, it's even more of a risk when people go rogue and start using the tools without you're aware of what they're using.
Absolutely. Do you think the fear of using it is exceeding the reason to be fearful?
No.
No? I know, of course you say that, Josh.
Because I hear like risk around data we've talked about earlier as the
Yep.
big fear, but I don't
Yep.
see it as any different to the cloud services. Like, I mean, I don't know. I'm not that technical, but I would assume that if it's on someone else's server, like a cloud, it's the same thing.
So the
Risk is the same.
Yeah, so
maybe.
most of the challenges that we have with the customers that we're talking to that have that perspective is if it's like in a shared environment from an inference perspective, or is the data crossing borders? Like there's all these different like tick boxes that they need to achieve to make sure that it's protected as it relates to an incident that they want to be insured against. So this is where the Wild West piece comes in and we don't actually know comes in. And so yeah, you're spot on. It is as close to how we're currently using the cloud as possible. But the simplest way I explain this is data at rest is not what happens when data is being used by AI. It's not at rest. Yeah, so it's at rest in our environment, but it has to go somewhere. It has to use GPU processing power, the inference activities, and we talk about metadata and cookies and all the things, and there's that sort of comparisons. But yeah, ultimately at the moment, when it comes from a risk perspective, it's are we insured if something happens, right? Directors of organizations are liable. The staff can do whatever the heck they want. If something happens as a result of a staff member in your organization, you're liable. So that's the kind of key for me in that world.
But I think just to, take up Ryan's point, I think it's vastly more secure than cloud. Like, again, I'm going to get technical again, but things get vectorized, right? So you're not actually passing words around, you're passing numbers that represent phrases. So, certainly aware of data sovereignty and those types of things are absolutely important. But I think as far as I'm using password !! On my cloud drive type scenario is, I think there's more risk in that type of thing than there is in using data. Now, I probably have overly high expectations of people's ability to recognize what they should and shouldn't be uploading. And I think I've proven that a number of times, and I even mentioned it in this session today. But I think, again, if you're not educating people on that, they're not going to know, right? So if you're just putting your head in the sand and hoping it won't happen, hope's not a strategy.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so this one's for you, Daniela. To zoom into workflows and implement AI effectively today, what are the most important skills for project managers in this AI-driven landscape? So such as collaborating with SMEs, identifying improvement steps, and creating loose frameworks that leaders can explore, and how might professionals start piloting these in their own projects or for immediate impact?
So this is really interesting, and thank you for your question, Josh. As a project manager, I see opportunities for AI use cases and new models everywhere. And I'll give you an example: stakeholder engagement, which I have been furiously investigating recently. How often are requirements and processes missed in initiation and planning stages? And further, it's not that no one knew that that was a requirement. It was just often that the people on that project bus had no idea that that was a requirement. Now, if we consider the people-based governance processes that we use today, and the expectation is that someone is checking your homework, whether that be a SME or the project sponsor, what you hope is that someone finds and highlights your oversight, allowing you the time to correct it before you enter into execution and it comes back to bite you. But the reality is that we live in a world where everybody is busy. We're not always deeply present when we're reviewing things, if we're reviewing them at all. And I have been on projects myself where I have submitted things to my sponsors and they've not even had a look at it, right? They've given me zero feedback whatsoever, which is where people-based governance falls over. And I'm always shocked at how much rope PMs are given, and it leads to all sorts of issues. So when I speak to peers about historical project experiences, I often find that the same things are repeatedly missed and overlooked in that frenzy to get into execution. It's rarely new concepts that are the culprit. I mean, to date, I've not worked with any organisation that is planning to build a data centre in space. I'd like to, but I haven't. Many organisations are just running the same projects over and over again, delivering the same services, the same products repeatedly, using the same staff. Hence, it makes little sense to me how these little things get missed all the time. The reference class data exists within the organisation, but when you have a large and revolving door of contractors where IP is lost, or you've got poor data capture and poor data handling, you can't ever be sure that the knowledge is captured, shared, or held by people that are executing projects. And this is where I see a real opportunity. So for me, if organisations can look deeply into the core perspectives of project delivery and ask pertinent questions, get knowledgeable answers, that changes everything. And put simply, what do we know that we have failed at in the past? And often that knowledge exists in our organisation, but how do we make that knowledge ubiquitous? So how do we avoid those common failures? That would be the commercial game changer for many organisations that run large project environments. And it's the concept of lessons learnt without having to ask people to do research and read, which we are notoriously bad at when we are under pressure and running at a target. Hence, my take on how to keep this real and deliver lasting value using AI is that whole concept of the retrieval augmented generation, the RAG models that we've been talking about, using your own project data, which can be leveraged for deep and discrete use cases. And that's not about automation or workflows. I believe we really just need to start with knowledge tools and then use that as a foundation for workflow tools in the future. So to David's point that he mentioned earlier, I'd argue that most organisations should start small and build a solid base, and I call it AI 101 first. So those RAG systems or finely tuned sort of large language models that are using your proprietary data, they're locked down in your environment, but you don't have to build them from scratch. Many might start with these pre-trained models that you can adapt in-house. So if I were an organisational leader today, my strategy would be to start with 3 fundamental elements: using our own data or your own data, keep it locked down in-house for privacy and commercial sensitivity protection. But I'd start by addressing things like stakeholders, historical knowledge, and risk. The reason why is that, number one, because you need the right stakeholder knowledge to create the best solutions. And remembering that knowledge is held by people, it's not by organisations. So in this case, I would highly recommend small sort of our people language models that can help you find the right people internally with the right knowledge for what you're doing. I also see, projects fail for the same reasons repeatedly, and it really comes down to, did you have the right people on the bus with the breadth and depth of knowledge that was required to provide sound guidance to project teams and sponsors? So I would make people a priority. But this type of solution needs to be very secure. It needs to know your people, which is your HR data, your organisational structures, who sits in what teams, what tasks do they perform, their roles, their skills, and even if you have it, the systems that they use and manage would be a game changer. But being able to use AI to find the right people in the organisation with the right skills and knowledge, and even impacted parties that you're going to impact with your project, would be really ideal. Secondly, if everyone had ubiquitous access to historical knowledge about projects and project failures, we would avoid so many project issues. And the reality is, historical failures teach you a lot if only you had access to the data to do the research during initiation and planning. So what has worked before? What didn't, what strategies failed, which ones succeeded. Just being able to create that hive mind of information within the organisation and query that would stop a lot of projects from starting that should never have started, and also a lot of projects from skipping up on the mistakes that we make over and over again, which is crucially important. And thirdly, many people believe risks are unique to them and their project. Again, they are often not building data centres in space. They are just doing bread and butter work. So again, I would highly recommend these small lockdown models, internal only, with all of the risks and issues that have been faced by previous projects that you can query. When was the last time that you read a project risk register? Honestly. When was the last time you read it from end to end? Yeah. As opposed to seeing a condensed version that's in a PowerPoint slide. Yeah. And if you had taken the time to read the entire risk register, did you sit back and think to yourself, really? Is that it? Is that all the risks that you could really come up with? Never have I seen a governance team request to see a risk register. I've never seen them respond and say, this doesn't show a depth of thinking. Have you really thought this through? My strategy isn't to, have AI produce your risk register, is to provide you with the knowledge, which may or may not apply in your context. So you need to teach people to think through their problems. But data is an asset, right, in that scenario. So I think the biggest hurdle, and the one that often paralyzes PMOs, is governance around AI implementation itself. So many teams are fearing disruption, data privacy breaches, which we've talked to today, workflow chaos leading to slow and stalled adoption. But the good news is that AI governance doesn't have to be bureaucratic or restrictive. It's fundamentally a risk-based approach, which project people are really used to. And then apply appropriate controls like, approval of workflows, audit trails, compliance checks, and scale only when the safeguards are in place. So that mirrors what we already do to govern projects. We identify, assess, and mitigate risks rather than avoiding innovation altogether. So with that sort of secure, RAG-based tools providing that ubiquitous access to historical knowledge and insights, we do better stakeholder mapping and matching, we do deeper risk assessments, we can make governance more consistent, proactive and effective, turning that oversight from a weak link into a true enabler of success. So adopting that risk-based AI governance mindset from day one, we can probably move past fear and analysis and pilot things safely. And the most important skill for me in this AI-driven landscape is how to harness the data that exists within your organisation for better knowledge, wisdom and decision-making. And the improvement steps they might find useful as a framework is to start small, prioritise commercial data security and be mindful of the quality and biases and ethics. Build a small AI task force, probably within your PMO. Choose a small handful of project teams with really good data, co-design a knowledge system, and then refine and iterate. And the last thing is metrics. Everyone knows that I love a good metric, but in this case, PMOs and project organisations need to track metrics like the time saved on stakeholder mapping, the time saved on doing your power interest grids. Measure it before AI, measure it post AI, and then really understand what was the real world outcome. So I see a lot of PMOs focus on process, but process is the vehicle, not the journey or the outcome. So I would start there, and later when you've mastered that AI 101, the next baby step after that is to really enable workflow automation by pairing process and knowledge. Really just ask yourself, will knowledge of delivering projects in my organisation improve if I make knowledge available to the people that need it? And I can't be sure, but even if there's a 10% reduction in project failures that can equate to massive money for organisations, that can be invested into other projects. So my question is now to you guys, is my AI 101 strategy achievable and safe, or absolute garbage?
It's achievable. Probably goes back to my question of, that's not easy. And it's not going to happen through vanilla Copilot or chat, right? Even when you're talking about uploading things that didn't work, how does the model know that they're the things that didn't work? And it doesn't actually suggest those things as things to do, right? So, that can actually be done, but that's more of a fine tuning than just RAG. That's exponentially more complex than just RAGs. Yes, but it absolutely can be done. And I guess that's the roadmap, that's the vision, that's the North Star. But there's many steps to get to that. That was nearly a utopian view of where we want to be. And it's going to take a long time. Not so much a long time, it's going to take many steps to get there.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of how quickly you can take those steps.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think, Ryan? Because I was pretty scathing about PMO then.
Yeah, I think it's ambitious. I think, like to David's point, I think it would happen over many iterations. But you're talking to the converted. I get excited when I hear about how AI is going to help PMOs and project management, and it's a profession that's ripe for transformation. And I think AI is going to kind of take the profession to the next level.
100%. Josh, what do you think? Because you are the data, privacy guy.
Small. Focus. Zoom in. Like we've got to be conscious of the typical big, gigantic solution for everything. This is really changing that, and so zooming in is actually the fastest way for us to see return on investment. I just pull back to the innovation mindset. Like this is really a call to action for everybody because of how fast this is iterating, to start to learn how they can iterate quickly too. Yes, against a strategy. Yes, against clear outcomes. Yes, with measurable the metrics, all the things. But if we don't, we're 12 months behind in the blink of an eye. Yeah. So that's probably my only addition to this. Is zoom in, think innovatively, consistently.
Correct. When I was putting this together, I was just really thinking about how do I dive deep into very specific failure points? Yeah, because you don't need to do them all. You just start with one, and everything you learn from that, you carry to the next. There are, depending on who you follow, P3, M3, PMI, APM, choose your flavour. But ultimately, there are some really core perspectives on project delivery. And even if you mastered one or two of them, you would make such a consequential difference to what we are doing and success rates. And that can save you millions. So I don't know why I'm not seeing any organisations say, my CapEx spend means a lot to me. How can I potentially use this just to save a fraction right there? And you must see this, Luke.
Yeah, I'm also thinking of that paradigm around PMOs. This is when I first started my career in project management. I worked for organisations that didn't have PMOs, and then when I moved into organisations that did have them, I'm like, why do you need a PMO? What do they do? And I'm just thinking AI is a great thing for PMOs because it'll probably get rid of most of them.
Yeah.
Because from what I've seen, I mean, it's not every PMO, but PMO effectively becomes this governance layer in between project managers and and whoever's in charge of an organization, and they tend to they have almost all accountability but no responsibility, and there's always this tension between project managers and PMO staff, and project managers just go away, stop bothering me, let me do my project, let me be in my space, go away, do your report, like I've had enough. So I'm thinking, yeah, AI will play a big function in making that more efficient. And also something as you were speaking around risk registers. Um, I, I get paid to read risk registers, so and
You're
make
the first
sure that
person I've met, Luke.
and make sure that they're accurate and to the point and they're specific, because
Yep,
especially at the moment, I'm doing a lot of work in the energy sector. So a
yep,
lot of risk registers are really scrutinized by the regulator, because
yep.
they don't want to fund contingency. So they really delve deeply into the risk register and go, well, that's a duplication, or that's something you can minimize. Why haven't you done that? Or that's something you can contract out. Why haven't you done that? So I think the moral of the story is, if you value it, you will look at it. And if you know other people are going to look at it, then you better look at it yourself.
Correct, correct. But I wonder if that's because A, you work in construction, so you have a lot of people that are financing this kind of stuff. And as a result of it, they're very focused on, as you say, the contingency around every risk. Whereas
Mm.
a lot of commercial organizations, I just don't see that occurring. I don't know. Am I alone? David, do you see a lot of scrutiny of risk registers?
Yeah, no. And in my role, when I'm talking to project managers, how's your project going, etc., the number of times, oh, we've got this and that. Oh, okay, so have you raised that as a risk? And
Yeah.
I would say 90% of the time they have not. You can see the light go off in their head. It's like, oh, yeah, good point. But they're telling me about it. Oh, look, we've just got this,
We haven't had
usually,
time.
UAT, right? UAT is always a risk, right? And we can't get through to the customer about UAT and there's no plan and blah. But okay, have you raised that? No, we haven't, of course. So yes, I absolutely agree. It's a big issue, in project delivery. From a consulting point of view, it's our Teflon, right?
Yeah.
We absolutely need to have that when we're dealing with our customers, for sure.
100%.
And
What about
Danielle,
you?
I may
Yeah.
be a bit passionate about it too, because risk is a lot of things, but one of the lead authors and responsible for the sort of the revised Victorian government risk framework. So if you want to see some of my work in risk space, look up the risk time cost contingency guidelines on the
Ooh, I
Treasury
will.
website. It's all there. Uh, and I can talk to you about how do you actually get something like that up and going, because there's all sorts of, you imagine how many hundreds of people I have to speak to get agreement that that's what we went with.
Wow. We should do a podcast on it, Luke, specifically on that. What about you, Josh? How often do you read risk registers? Even though you mentioned before insurance, and that's a really valuable point.
So at the moment, the majority of the space I'm working in is probably sub 100 mil revenue companies. Some will have a risk and governance team or a third party providing them support around it. Very few look at that consistently. Very few consider it before they make decisions. They're driven by the bottom line. They're driven by the strategy that's driving them in whatever direction it might be from a commercial perspective. So yeah, almost never, although AI is now on a lot of those individuals that have responsibilities radar. So it's a risk, but it's not necessarily a part of a register that has mapped the entire business and understands where things are going. It's a risk, as sort of David alludes to, because they either don't understand it or they're like, what the heck does RAG mean, or whatever it might be. So that's why it's there. But no, otherwise it's not a big part, I would say, of the commercial world and how they think. They just want to get stuff done.
Yeah, correct. What about you, Ryan? How do you feel about automating, not automating, but creating knowledge-based systems to help us with this kind of stuff?
I definitely don't like reading risk registers. I think it's right for automation, and I guess just give me the exceptions. Have AI agents look at risk and just tell me what I need to focus on, because often risk registers have too much detail. They're not succinct. Just give me the headlines, and then I can save time.
100%. For me, it's about knowledge. It's about have we ever done this project before and it kind of looks like this? And what were the risks that got raised? And to your point, David, about data accuracy, one of the big things that PMs need to understand is that in order for these AI solutions to work, and we have so much intelligence that we can harness if we do use them, but what I really need in your risk register is this was the risk, this was when it was raised, this was the action owner, and this is what happened. We implemented this strategy, we minimized the risk, and we closed it. Or it blew up in our faces and became an issue, and here's the link to the issue. Your data accuracy needs to be good, because then when I'm querying it 6 years later and saying, well, we've tried this in the past, I can go back and say, well, what were the risks around that? And what did we manage to mitigate and not? And has something changed now, 5 years later, where I might be able to start this again using the knowledge that I have? So once again, the SpaceX example, right? Keep sending the rockets up, keep iterating, but we can't do that without proper knowledge, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on. Just in wrapping up, guys, I'm going to ask each of you to give me a key takeaway from this session. And really what we're aiming to do is to help listeners implement AI in their project delivery with confidence. And, we're just trying to build a list of what are the key things that we think people should focus on.
I guess what I got out of the discussion today was start small, don't be too overambitious, and I guess meet the organisation where it's at in terms of navigating its guardrails around governance. I think is really important. That's what I got out of the discussion.
Awesome.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing. I'd start small, but also I'd say make people comfortable. So comfort and trust go a long way. Yeah. And I think with that, start small, that's about risk appetite. So it's, doing it on something that you can see and control somewhat, and not your whole organisation's gone to chaos.
I might just pull from David's, you're going to get left behind, which I think is a reality for most people if they aren't embracing this. So it's an acceptance of that, but not an overwhelm from that. So it's start, get involved, do so if you're a leader by embracing the people, do so if you're a project manager by bringing everybody in as a stakeholder and trying to learn from anything they might be picking up on the journey. So that kind of collaboration, communication, and ultimately an innovation mindset, I think, is what's going to drive success.
For me, what I'm constantly talking to client executives about is the statement that I made that it's not an admin console toggle that you can just turn on and make work, right? It's the out-of-the-box tools are not your solution. So you need to accept that. You need to learn. They need to have their own experiments to learn that, accept that, and then understand that the real value, as is always the case, unfortunately, requires real investment, both monetarily in project time, but also buy-in and change management.
Yeah. Interesting. So thank you, everyone. A heartfelt thank you to my exceptional panelists today, Ryan, David, Luke and Josh, for sharing your invaluable expertise and real-world insights into AI in project management and just in business. Your contributions have illuminated paths forward, and I'm sure that our listeners are going to appreciate it. To our dedicated audience, thank you for joining us. Your engagement fuels these meaningful conversations and helps empower project professionals worldwide. For everybody out there, if you get any value from this session, do one thing for me, which is subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Patreon. It's free and it keeps the conversations coming. And you can also follow us on LinkedIn and X. So until next time, keep powering your projects from vision to victory. And remember, embracing AI with smart governance isn't about keeping up with the hype. It's about leading with clarity to deliver real impact. It's DK, Ryan, Luke and David and Josh signing out. The content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute professional, legal, or financial advice. The opinions expressed by the host, guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of any affiliated organisations or sponsors. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information on project management methodologies and related topics, no guarantee is made regarding the completeness, accuracy, or applicability of the content to your specific circumstances. Listeners are encouraged to consult with qualified professionals before making decision based on the information shared in this podcast. The hosts, guests, and producers are not liable for any losses, damages, or outcomes resulting from the use of this podcast's content. By listening to this podcast, you agree to assume all risks associated with the application of the information provided. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you'll find value in our discussions.